love history. I love farming. I love growing. I love learning. I love knowledge. I love sharing the knowledge that I obtain. I like to talk. Okay. I like to share things that I know and things that I want to know and other things too. So, thinking on those things that I have a true love for, I've decided that what I want to do is reintroduce you and myself to a new This Farm Wife Life page. Yeah, I know. Crazy, right? I've been thinking about it for a couple months now, and I've decided that I wanted to dive into something a little bit deeper, a little bit more detailed, if you will. And this is where we've landed. Like I said, I want to give you guys a different perspective on our YouTube channel and who we are at Grace Farms, but I also want to go a little bit further by diving back in time a little bit into some history lessons. All right, so I have all these ideas. I don't have everything laid out perfectly per se, but I do have ideas I've been thinking about for a couple months now because I didn't necessarily love the way that our YouTube channel was going. If you know anything about our farm and my husband and most farmers, I think, they're a little bit quieter. And so when they're working, they don't want to talk. They don't want to jabber, and they don't find my humor very funny. So even though I'm laughing, they're not. So what I've decided I want to do is I want to record those mundane quote unquote moments and the projects that we do and all sorts of things like that around the farm and what's taking place at the farm. But then I want to do a voiceover on top of it so I can be quiet while I'm recording and I can just capture all the moments. Then I can jump back on here later on and I can explain to you what has happened and what we're seeing and all that stuff and give you guys a little bit more details than what we would normally give in an average just recording type video. So I don't know. We're going to see how it goes. But on top of that, I also want to take the opportunity to learn a little bit more about history. I know. It's a little bit, like I said, outside the box, kind of. We're going to do farm wife life and a did you know history lesson all in one. And we're just going to see how it goes. Because I think it's going to be interesting. Like I said, I've poured a lot of time and a lot of energy and a lot of thoughts into this. And I feel pretty confident. But we're just going to see how it plays out. And we're going to go from there. So I also know this may not be everybody's cup of tea, but it is my cup of tea, and I am more than willing to share it with you guys, and I hope and pray that you guys will enjoy it just as much as I have in making it. Because when I tell you that a lot of time and a lot of thoughts have gone into just this one history lesson itself, I mean it. Like, it's been like 2 weeks in the making of constant research, learning things, crying about certain things, and then finding pictures and images and story. I mean, the whole 9 yards. It's been phenomenal. It's been fun. And it's been so much information that I cannot not share it with somebody. So I'm going to share it with you guys. All right, so let's start from the very beginning. My name is Courtney, and I'm a farmer's wife trying to show the life of a farmer's wife through my social media accounts. I never thought that I would say I genuinely want to be a, what do you call them? Like, not an influencer. I don't want to be an influencer, but I want to be a social media presence. Social media presence. That's what I want to be. I want to be on social media, and I want this to be not my full-time job, obviously, because the farm is my full-time job, but I would like this to be a consistent, and it's like a dear diary for me where I can say, this is what I learned today. Jot it down. So like I was saying, I'm a farmer's wife, and I really do take that title very seriously, hence the page name, This Farm Wife Life. Because I'm like, I will claim it, I will take it, that is me. I want to be the farm wife. I want to be the farm wife. That's what I want to be called. I genuinely love the experiences that come along with it. I love the raising the babies, watching the kids grow, even though they're driving me bonkers currently at this stage in life. We have a almost 8-year-old, an almost 5-year-old, and a 3-year-old. And when I tell you they're giving us a run for our money, I mean it. Run for our money. But I love being able to be the wife and be able to take care of the home and help where I can and get my hands a little bit dirty, the whole 9 yards. I love doing it. And I think it is such a beautiful thing to get to be a part of that I do genuinely want to share it. Over the last 4 or 5 years, I have had so much just to be thankful for that I wanted to capture it on video and pictures, and I have. And I just want to share that all with somebody because this life that we get to live is truly very, very, very beautiful. And it is so much fun. It's so challenging. It's hard. It's something that you lay down in bed at night and you're like, I am so grateful that this is my life and this is what I've been called to do. But I'm also very grateful that I'm getting to lay down in the bed right now because I'm tired. So, my friends, I hope you will choose to tag along for this new venture, and I hope that you will stay around, learn with us, see the new things, hopefully watch us grow and flourish, and hopefully learn a little bit. I don't know. We'll find out, right? If I learn something, I'm going to share it with you guys, and maybe you'll learn something you didn't know too. Don't forget to subscribe. You can like, you can comment, you can do all the things, and those are free ways to engage and help us grow, and hopefully, fingers crossed, at some point in time, we'll be able to monetize off of our videos. Now, let's dive into the farm wife life story. So on January 10th, yes, nearly a month ago, okay? Listen, we don't judge here. A day late, a dollar short, but at least we show up, okay? January 10th, we had our first snow of the year. And most likely it's going to be the only snow of the year, and that just is what it is. Currently, it's like February 3rd or something like that, and it's 70 something degrees outside. This one little snowstorm that we got, it's probably all we're going to get this year. Because in Alabama, most of the time in the winter months, all we get is a little bit of ice. I say a little bit. We get some ice, and that is what causes a lot of issues for us in our roads. But anyway, so in the rare occurrence of snow for us, I decide in my head that I really, really want to be the cool mom. Like I have all these ideas in my head of things that I want to do. I want to frolic in the snow. I want to build all these 10-foot tall snowmen. And I want to do all the things like throwing snowballs. And it sounds so great in my mind. But I'm not a cool mom, so I don't do that. I just go out there and I stand in my blanket and 52 layers of clothes, and I stand out there and I watch my kids be cool, because I'm not. I love it. I'm just not. I don't want to be cold. If I don't have to be cold, I don't want to be cold. Even though I knew that the snow was coming, in my mind I was like, it would really be nice just to sleep a few more moments in this warm, toasty bed. But my husband, the farmer, reminded me quickly that I don't want to miss out on these moments because they're far and few between, and we already know that we don't get snow all the time, and I would I would be upset if I missed out on those opportunities. So in that moment, I decided I was going to be the sweet farm wife, and I was going to tag along for the morning chores. Yep. Forced is probably the right word, but we're just going to say I offered voluntarily to help. I sat on the buggy the entire time, but that counts for something, right? Truly, though, the farm is absolutely stunning with a little white glaze on top. It's just beautifully breathtaking. I really genuinely wish I could take pictures with my eyes. Cameras are fantastic, they're great, but they just do not do justice for what your eyes see. And I wish I could just capture all the details of what my eyes see. I can't be the only one. So here is a little sidebar. Rain, snow, sleet, hail, sunshine, whatever. It doesn't matter what kind of weather it is. The farmer does not have a choice but to get out there. Yeah, the farm waits for no one. No one at all, literally. The farmer is always showing up. He always has to be there. There are animals that depend on the farmer to be able to thrive in all of the elements. The winter feeding, the ice being broken so that the animals can continue to drink water. Things that a lot of people don't think about. Eggs being collected in hopes that they're already not cold or broken or too hot. The whole case scenario, right? Whatever it may be. And then in the winter months, providing extra hay for animals that just need a little extra warmth, Again, things that people don't think about. Plus, there's a multitude of other jobs that wouldn't get done without their hands. Just keep that in mind. You want to thank farmer every single day, because without them, you wouldn't be eating. I'm just saying. Thank farmer. Another fun fact. Did you know that in the winter months, cows can eat upwards of 20 to 30% more than what they normally do in the summer months? Obviously, it's because the cows require more energy to be able to get through the cold days. They're sitting there huddled up and trying to keep warm, and that burns more energy. And then, of course, how do we get energy? Just like human beings, it's through food. And then on top of that, if they're providing milk for their calves, they're definitely burning more energy than what they normally would be doing. So, on top of that, the foliage, the plants that are normally there during the summer months, such as grass and hay and all that kind of stuff, most of the time are not there during the winter months. So they have to substitute those things with feed and hay through the winter months. So cows, our cows anyway, really truly depend on the farmer to be able to make it through the winter comfortably, happily, healthily. So we began the morning just like the farmer always does. We gave the chickens fresh water and feed. This helps them get through the day, obviously. And then we let them out of the chicken tractor. We oftentimes get asked what our chickens are housed in due to like critters around here. We have a lot of coyotes, deer, all sorts of things, and we want to make sure that our chickens stay safe. Trust me, we've had some rough experiences around here with some animals. So what works for us is a chicken tractor, and they go up every single night. We lock them up, and then every morning they get let back out. That mechanism allows us to do exactly what the name says, and that is allowing us to hook up a tractor and pulling that chicken tractor from plot to plot as needed for the chickens to roam. This also allows them to naturally fertilize whatever plot of land that they're on, if you know what I'm saying. And then also, we surround their area with a solar paneled electric fence. So they're secure, it's movable, and we're still letting them be quote unquote free range, but safely. Free range safely. So on this morning, the birds were all super excited to see the door being open, even though there was snow all over the ground. And it was, I don't know, it's just, to me, it was hilarious to watch the chickens come out and start pecking in the snow. Like, they're like, what is this? We have no idea what this is. We've never seen this before. So on to the next task, the cows. They were quickly reminded the moment that they saw the farmer's buggy that they were indeed very hungry. Apparently they were starving. The mooing began and the farmer called them back up. Let's just call him the boss man. The boss man was needed to help distribute the hay to the cows and to the hay rings and all that stuff. So, with that being said, the boss man is the farmer's dad, and I know that he is tickled pink to be called that. Oh, wait, no, so I messed up. He is actually the second in command. The first in command is the littlest one that's sitting next to me, the 3-foot tall one. Yeah, that's the littlest one, and he's definitely the boss man of this farm. The other two children, though, were wise because they decided to come inside and make themselves some breakfast and then warm up by the fireplace. And let me tell you, smart, because I know by the time we were about to be done, the littlest one definitely wished that he was inside with them. Unwillingly, I began to share my blanket with the littlest boss. Both of us were becoming colder and colder by the minute. My fingers were honestly numb, and Kanan began to say that his toes were chilly. So, you know. Thankfully for us, we were not far from the warmth that the other boys were getting to experience. But, like my brain does, while we were sitting out there, I was just letting my brain wander, and I started to thinking about cold days in history. Ones that impacted who we are and how we got here to who we are today. And that sent me down a rabbit hole. So let's play a game of Guess This Moment in History. It's 1912. Woodrow Wilson has been elected the United States president. Nabisco, yeah, the cookie company Nabisco, produced the first Oreo cookie, the Oreo biscuit, well, whatever they wanted to call it then. Did you know, though, that Nabisco stands for National Biscuit Company? I sure didn't know that. Did not know that. Things you learn. New Mexico and Arizona officially became the 47th and 48th state in the U.S. The last emperor of China abdicated the throne in February, and little did many know that there was a world war right around the corner. And then, on April 15th, the Unsinkable sank. At this point, I want you guys to just pretend that you have no idea where we're going with this video, and you're just hanging on by a thread because you're like, what's she going to say next? What is she going to say next? I'm going to tell you, okay? Here we go. You ready? There was a ship leaving on its maiden voyage on April 10th of 1912. From Southampton, England, all the way to the port in New York. Actually, we need to go this way. Southampton, England, all the way to the port in New York. Like New York City in the U.S., I probably should include that too. Now, this said ship was truly one of a kind. Kinda, okay, so it was more like 3 of a kind. And that is because there was 3 sister ships. Which means, basically, that White Star Line, the British shipping company, that transported both passengers and cargo between the U.S. and the British Empire, made 3 nearly identical ships within a very short time frame. You ready for this? There was the Olympic, the Britannic, and the Titanic. Yes, I'm sure you got it at this point. You already knew, but guess what? Let me tell you some things that you may not have known. Now, we would absolutely be here forever if I wanted to explain everything to you guys about the building of these ships and the people that were part of it. Instead, I'm going to attempt to briefly cover the need-to-knows about the 2 sister ships. Sprinkle that in there a little bit, and then we're going to move back on to the big things about the Titanic. So, the RMS Olympic was the first of 3 ships to be completely constructed. It was constructed and completed by 1911. It served as a troop carrier during World War I. which I thought was like so cool. It was nicknamed Old Reliable. I love that. Now, it was retired from the sea in 1935. So it went from 1911 to 1935, sailing the sea, obviously, doing what it does and all that stuff. But do you know what they did with this beauty when they were done with it? They sold it. And then they scrapped it. Sold it and scrapped it. Like, could you imagine if we still had that ship, even just brought to land, and we were able to just look at it and see all the beauty that was, I cringed when I saw that. I was like, they scrapped it? I mean, I know it's normal to do, but what? Even after the Titanic sank, like, why would they not? I don't know. Moving on, the Britannic, on the other hand, it launched in 14. No, it didn't. It launched in 1914. It was the last of the 3 ships to be constructed and to be set sail. And it served as a hospital during World War I, y'all. A hospital. How stinking cool is that? It was so phenomenally eerie to me. I just loved it. I don't know. It's just so cool. I love it. Now, she met her own fate, though, by hitting a German mine in 1916. 2 years after she was built and put out there. Yeah. It's like, oh my gosh. 2 out of 3, and they couldn't even keep one of them? The other one had to be scrapped? I mean, I'm just saying. I don't know. If I was in charge, things would have been different. These 3 ships were all built for luxury and comfort versus being able to fly through their sail time. And all 3 of these were built at Harland and Wolff's shipyard in Belfast, Ireland, which is where I found myself absolutely going down another rabbit hole, okay? So I think that the shipyard and the men who took place in the building of these ships deserve an entire video of their own, because the stories, they were just so complexly beautiful, and it was such an interesting and intricate thing to see that may be somewhere we revisit later on down the road. Back to the RMS Titanic, y'all. Okay, so she was crafted by hand and hammer alone. There was no heavy machinery and large equipment available to help lessen the build load or shorten the time that it took to complete such a massive feat. Like, I can't even fathom or wrap my mind around the idea of building a ship by hand like that in today's society. I don't think it would happen. I don't think maybe it'd be about this big, but that's neither here nor there. Instead, every rivet, millions of rivets, were pounded in by hand. The welders and the platers also shaped the steel all by hand, putting it in place by hand, piece by piece. The carpenters, the architects, the woodworkers, and the plumbers all worked meticulously, designing every detail of all of the cabins on the ship. It's mind-blowing to me. It's absolutely mind-blowing to me. The dining halls were all exquisite, and of course, the grand staircase that most all of us probably think about when we think of the Titanic. You think about that little Hollywood movie that's out there, and you're like, wow, that staircase is just stunning. And that is because it is. It was done by hand, y'all. So when you think of the RMS Titanic, you just think exquisite details, beautiful. Speaking of RMS Titanic, do you know what RMS stands for? Because I sure enough did not know what it stood for until I started looking into this. It is the Royal Mail Steamer. On this ship, they were lugging stacks upon stacks of mail and packages and documents to locations. It's a mail steamer. I was like, the Titanic was a mail steamer? Are you kidding me? How stinking cool is that? But then I also thought, on the other hand, a little bit more of a negative thought, if you will. I'm like, what happened to all that mail? I can't help but think, knowing what we know now, that there are so many letters and so many packages that never made it to their intended destination. And that, to me, is actually a very sad thought. Like, how many words of love, business plans, wishful thoughts of, hope for the future, and I'm sorry letters never made it to their intended person. How might something as small as a letter of words actually making it all the way across the sea on that day, how might that have changed history? And that is something that we will never get the opportunity to know, obviously, at least on this side of heaven. Just something about that just is, again, eerie. Now, just 11 days after her completion, the Titanic set sail across the sea for her maiden voyage with 2,240 passengers and crewmen and crewwomen Yep. This was a once in a lifetime experience. No pun intended on that one. Anyway, many on board, though, primarily first and second class passengers, were there just because they could afford it. It would be nice to be able to afford fun things like that. Kind of. Okay, some hopped on this voyage, sailing to business ventures across the way, surely planning on increasing their family's wealth. And then others, most of the third class passengers, were seeking new beginnings for themselves and their families. And honestly, at the time, New York just seemed hopeful. Sadly, you know how the story goes. And obviously, many, many, many lives and dreams were lost that day. Jumping back in time for a minute. So 2 years prior, the iceberg that would shape history forever began to form. It began its own venture across the sea. It is thought that it traveled from Greenland to the collision site somewhere between 1,200 to 1,500 nautical miles. It traveled from there to there. Talk about wrong place, wrong time. Literally, wrong place, wrong time. Just a couple miles difference would have made a life or death situation gravely change. But the probability of having an iceberg make it all the way from Greenland to like sailing area is between 1 and 3%. That is what is being said by the experts. And I'm like, can you imagine? In your mind, in my mind anyway, I'm thinking all these stars have perfectly aligned, and the probability of all these things lining up, it's just miraculous on its own. So the RMS Titanic's maiden voyage was intended to last between 5 and 7 days, traveling approximately 2,825 miles, or for approximately 137 hours total. Of course, that depended on weather and water currency and all those things, and if there were to hit any speed bumps along the way, or icebergs. Pun definitely intended on that one. Most of these things were considered probably not going to happen. Most people aboard actually thought that this was going to be more like a mini vacation because it was a new, luxurious ship. It was beautiful. And they were sailing across the sea, making their way from England all the way to New York City in the USA. The first class passengers had many, many amenities that they could totally enjoy. There was a Turkish bath complex, which included a heated pool and a cooling room. And there were also squash courts that you could play on. And if you wanted to, you could pay to play against a professional. Just saying, you can add that extra challenge to yourself if you wanted to. There was also relaxation rooms, a library, an outdoor promenade that all these people just got to walk on. It was in my mind, I imagine it being so incredibly peaceful and comfortable and forced to be reckoned with. All these things were there to impress those who were not easily impressed, but I definitely think that they did their job. Second class received very similar treatment to first class, minus the pool. There was no Turkish bath complex, and there was not a squash ball court, but I think that they were okay. I think that they were still more than comfortable. And for me, I'm like, okay, this would have been the deal breaker. This would have been like, okay, yes, I am happy, I'm good, because they were served elaborate meals every single day. 3 elaborate meals every day by chefs. Yes, ma'am. 3 chef crafted meals every single day, and all passengers received it. Not just first class, not just second class, but also third class. Even the quote unquote lower class would have dropped approximately $836 in today's money just to sail on the Titanic with basic amenities. Now, I understand that this ship, even for third class passengers, was considered way before its time in luxury. Definitely an upgrade in comparison to anything others had ever sailed upon before. But the mere fact alone that all third class passengers had to share 2 baths for the entire journey is a no for me. Yeah, I'm a shower every day kind of gal, and I get it, different times, different place. And sailing on open waters really is not my cup of tea. So, if I had been on the Titanic, though, I'm sure you would have found me hiding down in the mailroom behind some stacks of mail, because that's probably all I could afford at that point. So, yeah, there's that. The highest paid rooms were approximately $103,000. But with that price tag came your own bathroom. fancy, real fancy stuff. All right, so back to the third class passengers. This was a brand new ship, which, like I said, definitely explained the hefty, in my opinion, price tag. It also didn't hurt anything that all the passengers received 3 chef crafted meals a day, like I had said before. So, I mean, kinda, I get it. But then on the other hand, they also had to share bunk rooms. Yes, so about 10 to a room. Also, most were being separated by men and women. Some families were together, but it was primarily known that men and women were just going to be separated. So, and then you go back to the 2 bathrooms for nearly 700 third class passengers. It leaves me with a lot of questions. That's a lot of people. We need to do some math on that, but I'm not going to do that right now because that defeats the purpose of this video. I digress. All right, so fun fact on things I looked up because I did not know the answer to. There were 10 decks on the Titanic. I didn't know that. There was 10 decks. The ship also left from Southampton, England, but it also made 2 more stops to collect passengers. It stopped in France and it stopped in Ireland. And I guess the way I always envisioned it, I just thought that it was a pick up and load in England and go straight on to New York, but that's not how it went. They picked up multiple passengers from different places, which is, I don't know, pretty cool to me. The ship was just 400 miles south of Newfoundland when at 11:40 p.m. a watchman saw the iceberg that shortly caused its demise. It was inevitable. Literally, it was inevitable. Here's another not so fun fact that left me in awe when my oldest told me. There were binoculars stashed in a locker on the ship, but the locker was locked. The locker was locked. And the key, it wasn't on board the ship. It got off the ship with another sailor named David Blair when he was transferred to another ship while they were docked at the last minute. Your guess is as good as anyone's when it comes to knowing if having access to those binoculars would have made a difference in the sinking of the ship or not. I don't, my opinion, it's just that. It's my opinion. And I really don't think that having binoculars, especially with it being 11:40 p.m. at night, it's dark out there, maybe they would have been able to turn a little bit sooner, but I don't know if it would have stopped the sinking as a whole. I don't know. And honestly, we don't know, and nobody knows. And that's where that ends, because again, it doesn't matter at this point. There was no binoculars. There was no binoculars that had access to, and we don't know what it would have been like if there would have been binoculars on there. Ultimately, the thing is we don't know, and nobody knows. Even if they say that they think that they know, they don't know. Because what we do know is that you cannot stop a ship on a dime. So, there's my opinion on that. The Titanic was the largest ship to set sail at the time, costing nearly $7.5 million, and that was at the time of construction. It was $7.5 million. If we replicated that bill today, it would cost us approximately $400 million, y'all. $400 million. Could you even imagine? Holy cow. I did not look up, what it cost to make ships nowadays, what actual, cruise ships and stuff like that cost, but I don't know. I'm gonna have to look that up here shortly, because I'm sitting here thinking in my mind, though it may cost that much for a cruise ship nowadays to be made, they are definitely not as exquisite and detailed, and just, we're not walking around with ball gowns, beautifully flowing ball gowns on those ships. Okay. So the Titanic simply could compete with any grand hotel, land or sea, and I think that really stands true to this day. It was extravagant. Of course, you probably know that there were only 20 lifeboats aboard the RMS Titanic. Yeah. Only enough to hold half of the people that were on board. And that was only if they were loaded down fully. And we know now that they definitely were not. Launching half full from panicked passengers attempting to get off as quickly as possible. And I understand that in a sense, but I was like, they should not have been launched half full. Why were they launched half full? Oh gosh. But then on the other hand, I'm thinking, why was there only 20 lifeboats on there? You know why? Because it was not aesthetically pleasing to have the actual recommended amount. And by choosing to only have 20, they were able to cut costs a little bit too. And that just makes me cringe inside. Those who were able to get aboard the lifeboats, primarily women and children, were rescued by the ship that heard the SOS, the RMS Carpathia. Carpathia. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that correctly. There were 705 survivors accounted for. And remember, there was 2,204 passengers and crew, men/women, aboard that ship. They were taken safely to the New York port after that. The unfortunate part, though, is that the Carpathia didn't arrive on scene until over an hour after the Titanic had already sank. Not floating, not just crashed into the iceberg, but sank. There were many who survived a landing into the water, some attempting to tread water and others clinging onto little bits of debris that was floating, all in hopes that someone would come to their rescue. And soon. The water temperatures were merely 28.4 degrees, but not freezing solid because the ocean obviously contains salt, which makes the freezing temperature lower. That didn't stop the air above, though, from numbing everyone and anything that it had access to. The estimated survival, once in the water, was merely 15 minutes. And with the RMS Carpathia not arriving until over an hour after the sinking, the odds of finding anyone alive in the water were incredibly slim, and they found that out. If I would have been one in the water, the Lord would have known that he would have had to take me right then and there, because absolutely not. The dark, the cold, and the water, I don't want anything to do with it. Take me out. I'm good. Take me home. I digress. I digress once again. The hull of the ship was made up of 16 watertight compartments, okay? So that is where the term unsinkable ship was coined. It was thought that if 1, 2, 3, or possibly maybe even 4 compartments were damaged, that there was still a great probability that it would still be able to sail on to safety. In this case, 6 of the hulls were damaged when they collided with the iceberg. And it is also said that I read, this is just an opinion of somebody, that if they would have hit the iceberg head on instead of at an angle, there may have been a different outcome as well. But again, that's neither here nor there at this point, is it? When the iceberg did come into the view of the watchmen, it is said that the whole ship was thrown into reverse. Obviously, again, you cannot stop a ship on a dime. But within 37 seconds of seeing that iceberg, they collided. They collided in 37 seconds. And I am sure that 37 seconds absolutely felt like 6 lifetimes, over and over and over again. I like to think that I react really well under pressure, but this kind of pressure is something that most all of us could never fathom nor imagine. You can't prepare for something like this. Once all the lifeboats were lowered into the water, hundreds of others still remained on the sinking ship. Unknown to them, this would become the last moments of their life. From the time that they collided with that iceberg until it completely sank was 160 minutes. And I wonder what the stars look like to them. I wonder if many people looked up, if many people looked around, how they sat in those moments. I can't even fathom. I can't imagine. But I hope that most all of them, if not all of them, had genuine peace and comfort surrounding them, and that possibly, maybe some of them even gave their life to Christ in that moment, realizing that there was nowhere for them to go, and that this unfortunately was the end. I don't know, it's very sad to think about, and that is my hope ultimately. I read a lot about the size and numbers and its capacities and all forms and all that stuff, but I couldn't quite envision what the ship was like in size until I finally found a really good analogy, which was it was about 3 football fields in length, which is quite impressive, especially for that time frame. The ship began to sink bow first, which is the front of the ship, when it hit the iceberg, causing the stern, the rear end of the boat, to begin to rise out of the water. Envisioning the blockbuster movie now, okay? Around 2 a.m., the tilting of this boat caused the weight to simply snap in two, like it was nothing but a stick being snapped. It literally just, and they both started to sink. I know my hands aren't doing the correct motions, but you get what I'm saying, right? The days following the tragic sinking were thought to be a search and rescue, but instead, they ended up being a search and recovery mission solely. If a passenger didn't make it onto one of the lifeboats, they either ended up being one of the 300 bodies pulled from the water or one of the approximate 1,160 who were completely lost at sea, never accounted for. Those pulled from the water were taken to Halifax in Canada to be identified, or they ended up being buried at sea. The completely lost at sea total included the captain, Edward Smith, who went down with the ship that he was guiding. Another who went down with the ship was the chief designer at the time, Thomas Andrews. He was said to have been urging others to get off the ship if they were able to, labeling him as a hero in his last moments. He was on board the ship with his guaranteed crew, which was made up of 9 other men who helped build the RMS Titanic. So they were on board, enjoying the fruits of their labors, chatting with others about the history that they had made, and being available to lend a hand if any problems may have occurred during their voyage. Since they knew all of the ins and outs, they were able to fix almost anything, or so they thought. And obviously, little did they know that the problem that would actually arise would be unfixable, and their last moments would be spent on the ship that they had poured so much of their life into. Their heart, their soul, their blood, their sweat. Literally, they poured so much of themselves into it, and that ended up being their final resting place. Now, there were thousands aboard the ship that had stories that were worth sharing. Like, literally, there were so many stories that I ran across that I'm like, gosh, this is just, it's so beautiful. My heartstrings were tugged so hard reading stories of people and lives that were lost and also saved upon this ship. So, but for the sake of time, I had to pick and choose which ones I was going to talk about today, and maybe later on down the road we'll go back and we'll talk about some more. We'll just have to see where this goes. So, one that I thought was totally worth talking about was the St. Louis reporter Carlos Hurd, who was on the Carpathia with his family when they detoured to pick up survivors of the sinking Titanic. He took this opportunity and put his skills to use. Of course he did. He interviewed passengers from both the Titanic and the Carpathia, getting first-hand experiences and retellings of the tragic story that had just taken place. I don't know if I would call it a story per se, but tragic circumstances that had just taken place. And of course, a lot of his works ended up on the front pages of the most prestigious newspapers. Then there was Isidore and Ida Strauss, who were represented in the Titanic movie. They were the sweet couple who was lying in the bed as water began pooling in around them. She was said to have spoken up when she was told to get onto a lifeboat, saying that she would not be separated from her husband. As we have lived, so we will die together. Now, that is a love worth having. Isidore's body ended up being recovered, but Ida was never found, unfortunately. Isidore Strauss was a U.S. congressman and also the co-owner, alongside his brother, of the Macy's department store. Fun fact. Another wild fact is that Milton Hershey, that Milton Hershey, your chocolate man, right? He and his wife planned to be on the Titanic's maiden voyage, but at the last minute, they had to cancel the reservation. Mr. Hershey needed to be back in the U.S. a little bit quicker than what the Titanic was going to be able to offer them to be able to take care of some business. And remembering that the Titanic obviously wasn't made for speed, it was going to take longer, yada, yada, yada. So they just decided to cancel the reservation, and they got aboard a different ship. And that last minute change allowed him to reach the age of 88, passing away in 1945, over 30 years after the sinking, in Hershey, Pennsylvania. And honestly, I think that he'll be a story I'll cover later on down the road too, because his legacy is literally something of its own. I was mind blown when I read some of his story. I was like, I have to stop myself before I just derail in a completely different direction. Now, despite the Titanic submitting their SOS message, including their location, the wreckage site was not located until September 1st of 1985. This was over 70 years later, like literally a lifetime later. Most of the survivors of the sunken ship had since passed away, never to see the Titanic again. And I'm sure, in my thinking, that that was probably a very bittersweet feeling for them to not have to see the wreckage of that ship again. I don't know. I can't put myself in their shoes because I have no idea. But Elizabeth Milviana, hopefully I'm saying that correctly, Dean, on the other hand, did get to witness the locating of over 6,000 pieces of memorabilia as well as the ship. And this was all collected off of the ocean floor, and she got to witness that. In actuality, though, I really think it's safe to say that she probably didn't actually remember the sinking of the ship, let's back up just a little bit, because she was only 2 months old when she boarded that ship with her parents and her older brother. The Dean family wasn't even supposed to be on board of the Titanic ship, but since there was coal strikes happening, they were placed on the boat as third-class passengers. The family's plan was to immigrate to Wichita, Kansas, where a family owned a business, and her father planned to become a stakeholder in that said business. Basically, her parents were dreaming of a better life for their family, and that's where they were headed. Now, it is said that the father felt the collision take place and that he returned to tell his wife, Etta, to dress the kids and return to the main deck. This is where Elizabeth and her mother and her brother loaded up into Lifeboat 10. Her father, unfortunately, was amongst those who were lost that night and were never identified. Her mother was devastatingly heartbroken, and they opted to return to their homeland to be surrounded by her mother's family. Elizabeth lived to be 96 years old, passing away in May of 2009 as the last living survivor of the Titanic. And I did go down a little bit of a rabbit hole on that one, and I was like, okay, well, who was one of the older people that, survived alongside her? And there was another little girl, I can't remember her name per se, but she and her family were aboard the ship as well. But the story impacted me greatly because, it just shattered my heart into pieces. So basically what was said to have happened was the dad told the mom, again, to, get the kids dressed and get up on board, and they were going to be loading onto the boats. And that family, the kids and the mama, were able to get onto a lifeboat as well. And the dad went back downstairs. This is what gets me. The dad went back downstairs and went and got a warm thermos of milk, and the lifeboat was already descending. So the dad grabbed a hold of the ropes and dropped down to be able to give his family the thermos of warm milk to take with them. And he got back onto the Titanic, and unfortunately he was amongst those that perished that day as well. And that just, to have that imprinted as the last moment of your husband or your dad is just, I don't, golly, I'm gonna cry again. All right, here we go. We gotta finish this up now, guys. We're already forever in here. All right, so I found myself thinking about the dogs. The dogs. Were there dogs aboard the Titanic? Yes, there was. And guess what? It's really actually not a fun fact at all. Apparently there was 12 that were documented for, and unfortunately only 3 of them for sure made it upon the lifeboats with their people. And that's really incredibly sad. And I realized in that moment that I probably should not have looked that up. So there's that. According to the Royal Museum of Greenwich, there was approximately 1,503 lives lost that night. 815 passengers and 688 crewmen and women. Mothers, many fathers, granddads, and many, many friends. My oldest, Silas, has been right alongside me with this journey on learning about the Titanic, and we've just made it a little bit of a history lesson. He, like me, asks all sorts of questions, and one that has stuck with me is this. What would have happened if the Titanic did not sink that night? Clearly, I don't know the answer to that, and nobody alive knows the answer to that, no matter what they say. In my mind, though, I imagine that if it wasn't her to sink, protocols may not have been changed, and lessons that were learned that night may not have been learned. Meaning to me that there may have been another ship to sink in her place later on down the road. To wrap it up full circle, I wanted to highlight one thing. The RMS Titanic is most often referred to as the unsinkable ship. But in actuality, the builders only deemed her as practically unsinkable. Tomatoes, tomatoes, right? Something like that. But by man's definition, practically would imply that is almost but not quite unsinkable. The lesson that I learned in that is practically unsinkable ships do sink. They are man-made after all. And there's that. I turn it off. Thank you for being here. I appreciate you. If you watched all the way through, again, I hope that I will see you in the next video, and fingers crossed, I hope you enjoyed.